Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Gert Drapers.
Well, thank you very much. I'm still not used to the American way of introduction, but welcome to this presentation. My name is Gert Drapers. I'm the product unit manager of the tools group, and my group is responsible for writing everything in SQL Server that has a UI, which is basically not set up or replication. Excuse me. So what I want to talk about today is where we are, what we learned in 7.0, and then how we applied this and actually created a new set of tools or changed our tools for SQL Server 2000. Excuse me. And then after that, we'll have the ability to ask questions or have a discussion after that. So within the WinDNA framework, the tool sets are important from a manageability perspective to get SQL Server up and running and maintain it in this environment. And basically when we look at our tools, that's what we're talking about. Everything that compromises Enterprise Manager, Query Analyzer, the Profiler, which is also including the Index Tuning Wizard and Replay Engine, our data transformation services, SQL Agent, and a whole set of small tools, that's actually where we are responsible for. And these tools, we actually chopped that up in 3 pieces. So what we did is we looked at how do you manage SQL Server and the environment? How do you do operational management and monitoring? So our main entry point here is Enterprise Manager, where we allow you to configure SQL Server, where you have maintenance jobs, where we do object creation. We also allow you there to interact with the agent, which is a time-based scheduler, which allows you to create jobs. Also parts of the monitoring aspect, you can do it in 2 ways. And I'll have a talk later on today, and on Friday there will be a repeat. We're going to talk about how to use the tools to actually improve query performance. So there we're going to drill on, or drill into, how do I use tools actually to make my application perform better? From the DBA perspective, and this is where you see a huge leap forward in this release, we spent a tremendous amount of effort in making Query Analyzer a better authoring environment. In 6.5 and in 7.0, it was a great query execution tool, but we added a lot of functionality in SQL or in Query Analyzer to actually give you a better understanding about what's going on in the server, not only from a server perspective, but also from a client perspective. In SQL Profiler, we enhanced that and we added some extra functionality to allow you to do better server tracing. And we'll talk about that later on. In the data movement arena, the DTS product has been moving forward rapidly. So DTS allows you to move data, to scrub data if you need to make changes, and to execute all these packages into a continuous workflow using the job execution engine. This all runs on the client today. If you want to schedule that on the server, what you can do is take SQL Agent. There are 3 sessions this conference about DTS. 1 overview session and 2 advanced sessions, 1 on programming and 1 on how to move after the programming session. So if we look back to 7.0, what did we learn? Well, we started off by doing a lot of usability testing in the tools group. And this told us that we have a high learning, or it's easy to get into the tools. We have a lot of wizards, so it's easy to step up. But after that, it's pretty hard to continue. We also got a lot of feedback. And basically what my team is doing is we're actively trawling all the public news groups, basically the Microsoft.public SQL Server news groups, and you will find us out there, answering questions, helping people out. We use it the other way around to actually learn from the real scenarios that you guys run into. Also, conferences like this will help where we get good feedback. One of the other things is I started 3 months ago, I introduced the SQL Wish alias at sqlwish.microsoft.com. And this is lately published in SQL magazine. And since its start, we got over 500 requests for new features for a SQL Server. These feature requests don't go into a black hole. They immediately go to the development team. So if you have any wishes or requests, use this alias. That's the best way to do it. We also, as Paul said, we are having one-on-one customer FaceTime in our ISV lab, in our customer lab, where we have 5 customers a week coming to Microsoft, coming to Redmond and helping us, or we help them, actually getting their application to work better, make performance improvements, understand their needs, and that's how we integrate this functionality into our product. So that's where we learned. But what did we actually learn? Well, we did learn that a couple of the components are pretty fragile in terms of installation, DLL hell problems, version dependency problems if you install this product after this product. So one of the things my team is actually doing today is adding extra checking into the tools to make sure that we're working with the right components. One of the other numbers in the top 10 is that all dialogues in Enterprise Manager are modal. The biggest one after that was actually that we don't expose all server functionality. And this will always be true, more or less. It's like, one reason is we cannot expose it. Second reason can be that it's coming on too late in the cycle, but we have a hard time catching on. We're trying to do our best actually to keep up, and we did a hard push this release to actually keep up till the last moment. The other thing that we learned, and this was especially true to using the usability testing, is like if we asked somebody in the usability lab to do something, what they did is they opened up books online and copy and pasted. That basically told us that our tools didn't help them. And it's like also that the books online didn't provide enough samples or working samples or better samples. So that's something we started to work on at that point. The other last thing is that we learned when doing usability on Profiler is that a lot of people had problems with the amount of information that Profiler was giving back. They couldn't create a correlation between the events and the columns that were generated. So they had a hard time actually making good use of the tool. And that's also, I will address that in the session later on. So taking that as input, what we did is we took this and applied it into an, although very short development cycle. But the team that I'm running, the main focus was to work on stability and robustness first, add the missing functionality back into the products, and then start working on incremental features. Right now we're working on bugs and performance. And another thing is that we had to make all our tools cluster aware, where that wasn't a real objective for the 7.0 release. Another hard requirement is that all tools must support 7.0 and 2000 out of the box. And the main reason for that is that there is this new cool feature called multi-instance, which allows you to have a 7.0 installation and a SQL Server 2000 installation side by side. So what do you do from a tools perspective? Well, we'll make sure that you have one set of tools which administers both 7.0 and 2000, which has all the backwards compatibility and everything in there. Another dependency that we had to work with was dynamic resource loading. We started doing this in 7.0, where we were adapting to your locale of your client, and this is especially interesting for the international market, where if you are on a German workstation or a Japanese workstation, you get a Japanese tool with Japanese error message. The missing link today was that you didn't get any error messages from the server weren't Japanese if you were on a Japanese client. Today we can identify the client connection on the server's locale and actually load the error messages in this language that we need. On the platform support, there are little changes. We dropped support for Windows 95, but we added support for Windows ME or Windows Millennium. NT4, we still support SP5 or higher, including the embedded edition of NT. And of course, Windows 2000, including Terminal Server. For the tools, we do have a requirement on IE5. And the reason we do this is that we require it for Unicode support and XML parsing. The engine, if you just run the plain engine, you don't have this requirement. The tools also require MMC 1.2, which is standard shipping in Win2K, and we're moving up to MDEC 2.6. So what do we change? So Enterprise Manager, we started off by evaluating what do we need to add. Well, the first thing that people were confused about is, how do I attach and detach a database? If I'm looking at the news groups, the most common question probably is today, how do I copy a database from A to B? And how do I do that? And a lot of people don't know, or it's not obvious that you can do attach and detach databases. And one of the reasons was that there is no UI support. So we added UI support in there, which is actually pretty smart and allows you to enumerate all the file relations from a master data file. Column level permissions. This was a big mistake in 7.0 where we actually didn't put that in. It was simply, it was a missing thing. So we added that back. And we also added the server network utility into Enterprise Manager, so you don't have to go to a separate tool. We also reworked the HTML pages and the linked server UI to be of more help, although we're still not at a point where I'm completely satisfied, but I have the team working on that. And if we look at the bigger features that we added, is one of the things is the copy database wizard. I will show you that in a minute. Also, log shipping is a very important feature for us. You saw it showing up in the engine part, but we're actually doing the physical implementation and making it work for it. So then some incremental changes that we made. We made all editor dialogues resizable because we know that all these postcard editors weren't much of use. So we made that sizable. The other thing we did is we made a huge improvement in DMO, where we actually had a footprint reduction of 50% compared to 7.0 SP1. This is basically by implementing a smarter memory management and a more aggressive trimming when we release objects. We also speeded up the load time of Enterprise Manager by 7 times. And this is basically due to the fact that we have a new Unicode redirection layer. And then you ask, why do I need this? Well, SQL Server, we went through a lot of effort to give you one set of executables, which is 100% Unicode enabled, which runs on every platform. And since Win9x is not the best Unicode platform in the world, we had to create this foundation layer. One thing we couldn't fix for you, although it was high on the list, and I really regret we couldn't fix this, but it's simply too much of an infrastructure hit, is we couldn't remove the modalness of most of the dialogues. That's something that is going away in the next release. So then on to the new things. These were just incremental changes. With the introduction of Win2K, we have a new way of locating services and facilities in your network through the Active Directory. SQL Server is playing a part of this world. We are actually publishing ourselves into the Active Directory if that is available. So what do we publish? Well, we publish that there is a server named X, that there are databases, and that these databases have replication publications, for example. So all the things that you want to know from a perspective like, I'm looking for something. What you now can do is use the Active Directory as a locator servers. Basically, you can ask, which servers are there on the network? We used to have server enumeration through the ODBC APIs, which was based on NetBIOS. It only gave you the server that ran, only an NT server, and only the server in the domain, in the same domain. That was a huge restriction. Active Directory allows you to do much smarter directory lookups and implement something like location transparency. So for example, now you can say, give me the SAP server. And if you do that query against the Active Directory, you will get a connection point back, and the application can connect. So you can, in the meantime, move this server from server A to Z without the user having to know this and having to update his application or his UDL, if your application would use the Active Directory to look it up and get the service connect point. The way to get to all this information is through a browser UI, which I will show you in a minute. The schema of all this, so how do we store all the information about the SQL servers, is a standard part of the Windows 2000 Active Directory schema. And we did this to minimize the hassle to implement this, because otherwise you need to go through a lot of effort actually to make schema changes. So this is how it looks in a diagram form. We register as ourselves as services, which in the Active Directory world is called a service connection point. So we'll register the SQL server, we'll also register the OLAP server, and you can go after them. But SQL servers have one-to-many databases, or one-to-many, or zero-to-many actually, repository publications, or publications, and one repository. So that's information you can now ask in an Active Directory search UI, which I didn't know I was going to be on the net, otherwise I could have done it real time. But what you can do is you fill in the basic things. So for example, this is querying on a very limited domain on my machine. Give me all the servers that are version 8.0. And it returns these two things. This is just a basic thing. More interesting is, for example, what you can do through the advanced search, where you can say, give me all the machines that have a registered owners which starts with Rick, that are not clustered and that are running TCP/IP. This information can instantly get back to you from the Active Directory query, and now you can start using this entry point to actually make your connection to the server, and therefore establish location transparency. Of course, we need to do some work to get this information in. It's just not free. It's like you need to tell that something is going to happen. So during server startup is the ideal time to actually register information into the Active Directory, especially because service connection points, like the fact that which TCP/IP port or pipe you're listening on, will not change for the duration that the service is running. So during startup, we'll execute a stored procedure called SP Active Directory Start, which is known as starting procedure if you are in an Active Directory world. And it will register all the service connect points that are needed for your server, register your missing databases, and update all the database properties. For example, after a backup, we place the trigger on the MSDB's history table. So the Active Directory also reflects when was your last update. And then we also update the other database properties. But you can also influence this yourself by, if you want to have a more frequent update, you can schedule a job to T-SQL in the agent, or you can simply call one of the manual stored procedures called SP Active Directory. In total, there are only 3, which one of them is actually a duplicate of the other, which because it's now the starting one, which is the last one. So the Active Directory SCP updates the service connect points and all underlying objects. And you can pass in a couple of parameters to say, I want to create but not update, I want to only update, I want to shut down this node, etc. If you're only interested in updating limited information, you use the next one, where you say that you want to SP Active Directory object, where you only want to update the underlying objects. As I said before, the other one is now the starting procedure, which makes it happen that if you restart your server, everything gets pushed out to the Active Directory. Active Directory requires 2 parties to use it. It's like we can publish our information, but if you don't have an application that consumes it, it's not of much use. You can do a search, but then you still have to type it in. And you see that a lot of applications are moving that direction, and that's also part of the WinDNA environment. So the next thing that we added was actually the copy database wizard. And this thing lived under many names, from online migration wizards to data copy wizard, whatever. So this is what they came up with was the final name. But the basic thing is it allows a DBA to copy or move one or many databases from one SQL server to the other. And you would say, well, that's not a big deal. Well, now take a step back and look at what needs to happen if you really want to make this work. You want to copy all the logins, because otherwise the security is screwed up. You want to have that all the SIDs are matching, so your security again works. Maybe you're referencing shared objects in master that you want to copy with it, because otherwise your application doesn't work. Maybe you have jobs attached to this database which you want to move with the copy operation. This is all done by the copy database wizard. It allows you to copy or move one or more databases from a 7.0 or 2000 to a 2000. Why is 7.0 not a destination? Well, this is basically to make it easier for us because 2000 has column level collations. So basically, whatever your source was, whatever code page or a sort order, it will always work on 2000. The other way around, we have to apply a lot of restrictions, and 9 out of 10 it will not work. So that's why we made this decision. The copy database wizard also resolves logins and makes them move to the destination if they're not present. For anti-integrated security, that's not a problem because a SID is globally unique. But in case of standard security, if you're using standard security, this is not true, and you need to fix this up, and that's what we're doing. And we're copying the database using attach and detach. So we basically guarantee you that you have a complete and exact image of your database. Everything we do is restartable. So let me show you this in Enterprise Manager. So I'm sorry that this font is not going to be much bigger, but so I'm going to take a database, the customer database, and going to move this to this wizard. So I'm going from a source to not the cannoli one. I'm going to my 8.0 instance or my 2000 instance. So what this will give you is it will give you all the databases that are not available on the other server. I will talk about this in the next slide, why this is. So right now I only have two options because all the other databases either exist or are system databases and we don't move these. So let me take the customer database and don't want to take a move or a copy, I want to move the database. So I'm saying move. I can change the data file locations if I want by modifying this. And then he's asking me, do you want to move all the logins? And I can do all the logins or just the logins that are used in this database. So I only resolve all the database users. I can go for shared objects. I can simply say take all shared objects or let me pick a list. Or don't do it at all. I know what I'm doing. So take the jobs. For example, we'll ignore the jobs. I know there are no jobs. User-defined error messages. If you have an application that's relying on user-defined error messages, you want to move these. So we'll leave this in. Oops, sorry. So what he does, under the covers, we create a DTS package. And this DTS package is moved to the destination server, in this case, my same notebook, I'm sorry. And then we're going to execute this immediately. So he tells you what you're going to do, and basically it gives you a screen like this. So it's going to move, and it will tell you step by step what's going on. So it's scripting out objects. It takes steps, and of course there is a failure. That's what I tried it with the other database before, and then it worked, of course. So the whole idea is, oops, like this. So you take the database and you move it over after that. I know what's happening. I'm disconnected from the network again. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. That's something that happened to me. So it moves over all the information from the databases. So this can be used actually to move databases between servers or instances of servers. So you have, in my case, I have a 7.0 server and a 2000 instance. I want to ping pong databases around by moving them. I can also use it for server consolidation. I have many small databases that I now want to move to a big box. Setting up a test environment, basically copying it. So what happens, it's implemented as a DTS task. So what we do is like we have the copy database wizard, which either runs on one machine, on two machines, or on three machines. It's like we create a connection to the source server, get all the information, create a package, and move that package onto the destination server. So the destination server will have the DTS package. Then we have the SQL agent execute the DTS package and pull the data from the SQL 7 in this case to the 2000 destination. So there are no changes on the source. You will only have, if you're moving more than one database, we'll do one at a time. So you'll have one database offline for a while. Then we copy over the files, move them over, attach them back, and go on. So there are no changes on the source, and all processes run on the destination. Restrictions. There are a couple of restrictions that we have to deal with. One restriction is we do not allow you to change the server name or the database name during the copy or move. And we do this for a reason. We are not going to go through all your views and store procedures and user-defined functions to figure out if you use a three-part name. Because if you would use a three-part name, you will definitely break if we're going to change the database name. So we don't allow you to do this. You can do this by manually changing it before you move or after you move. If the database is replicated, today we cannot move or copy it because there's too much information buried in the database that doesn't make sense on the destination. We're working with the replication team to actually get this resolved for the next release. A logship database cannot be moved. It can be copied. It's perfectly safe to copy it, but you cannot move it because, again, there's information in there. And if that database, which is being log shipped, which I will talk about in the next slide, then that's going to fail. So on Win9X, you can use that as a source, but since we don't have remote administration from the destination, you need to create the share yourself to expose the data files. You need to be a sysadmin to do this because we need to ping pong and attach and detach databases, which is a sysadmin task. And the agent needs to have the proper NT security rights to actually connect to the destination and pull over all these files. So that's the copy database wizard. Log shipping. One of the things that this is around in the resource kit for 7.0, we use it internally actually since 6.5. Our internal technology group is using this as a mechanism to create warm standby servers. What it basically is, it's nothing more than making frequent transaction log backups, sending them to another server and applying them in the same order so you're in sync. The cool thing about this, and this is the big differentiator between replication and log shipping, is what this causes is that you will only have to worry about one database. You always get the complete database as a full image. This will include DML, schema changes, permission changes, role changes, everything. All operations that are logged will be part of your database on the secondary node. The way we implement this is through the maintenance plan. So it's actually executed through SQL mains. There is a monitoring guy in the middle who monitors if everybody's in sync, and I will show you later on. So once we made the transaction log backup, we're actually going to restore it with restore with standby. Today we only allow SQL Server 2000 to SQL Server 2000 only, because there are some changes in the way indexes are created, etc., which prevents us from using 7.0 in this mix. We could theoretically use 7.0 SP2 as a source, but we're still working on that. One of the harder issues is like, well, now we have this warm standby server, but what if this guy goes down? And I want to continue log shipping. Well, we have implemented the role reversal. So you can change the primary nodes to the secondary nodes instantly. So as I said, the main guy in the middle is the monitor. And the monitor actually allows you to look at the servers that are participating in the log shipping and see what the status is. So it looks like this. It's a big screen in Enterprise Manager which gives you all the high-level overview. Then you can drill in and actually see how far this guy is out of sync. And this guy, he's 1 minute delta, and his last update is also 1 minute, so he's not behind at all. So the way this works is you set up a primary server. The primary server starts to dump his transaction logs. These transaction logs are pulled by one or many secondary servers. So you can have as many secondary servers as you want. They will pull it over, and we're pulling and not pushing because of scalability concerns. And then we're going to apply the restore, or the transaction log, using a restore with standby. And that way we create a warm standby server. Now if you want to fail these guys over, or actually I shouldn't call it fail over because it's not fail over. If you want to reverse roles between the primary and the secondary, you say so in the monitor and he will start doing this and take action. So that's log shipping. So another way to move data around, of course, is the data transformation services, which is both a data movement tool, a data scrubbing tool, and a job execution tool. One of the biggest things we did, and Ewan Garden will talk in much more detail about DTS than I will today, is one of the biggest enhancements we made is the multi-phase data pump. And this basically, what it does is it allows to have restartability of steps. So now you can have a step which will fail, then kicks off another thing or restarts itself. You can implement aggregation doing that, and that will give you a much powerful programming paradigm to use. We are also moving primary and foreign key constraints from heterogeneous data sources. Today we know that we are working well with Oracle, Sybase, and Access. And the reason I have only this limited list on here is because this is depending on the iSchema row set information that OLEDB providers are actually exposing. So we're testing it, and we're currently testing with Marantz to actually get some better coverage. To get you started as a VB programmer using DTS, what we did is we productized a tool that Bill Hochhead wrote, a DTS package saver to VB, and now you can create a package, instantly save it as VB, and use that as a starting point for your project. More important than that is that you now can provide parameters at runtime to a package. So instead of hard coding things or getting things out of global variables, you can now pass parameters through the DTS package. For example, say, go to this server, take this table as a parameter. We worked hard on performance. Ewan has a lot of information about that. And we implemented a lot of custom tasks. An FTP custom task to go to FTP and move data around. And also an MSMQ custom task to create asynchronous actions between multiple servers running DTS. You can execute a package from a package, therefore creating a master package, which makes it easier to create small Lego blocks of DTS packages and deploy it. Dynamic properties gives you a way to actually use that. And the new custom transformations are mainly done because of speed improvement. So a lot of string manipulation functions like upper string, lower string, and datetime manipulations are now written as a custom transform, which increases the performance by 10 times. In 7.0, you need to be connected to actually edit the package, which is a pain. So we allow you now to do a disconnected edit. We also made sure that the test mode now also support global variables and lookups, which was basically a missing thing in DTS in 7.0. The parallel data pump allows you to support hierarchical row sets. We don't expose this through the DTS designer today. This is something for the DTS programmers only. And the other thing that I want to point out to is like the runtime UDL binding. This allows you to, at runtime, resolve a UDL binding instead of what we do in 7.0, where we do it at design time. This makes deployment of packages much easier. Because if you point it to a UDL, it will basically pick up the UDL of the server and not the one that's built in when you created the package. So, SQL trace. One of the things that we did was when we looked at SQL Profiler, it's like nobody understood there are two things. There's SQL trace, there's Profiler. SQL trace is the server side of the world. Profiler is the client side of the world, using SQL trace as an output format. We went through a lot of effort in this release to make SQL trace better, scalable, and more reliable. So what we did is we completely integrated it into the engine. Integrated it with this user mode scheduler in the engine to prevent blocking issues. And therefore we improved the scalability of it. We're also using the server-side I/O mechanisms to actually write out server-side files. In 7.0, you always write out your file through Profiler, so it's always a client-server style connection. In 2000, you can explicitly say, create this file on the server. I don't want to see it in the UI ever, only later. What we also did is we created, or we changed the file format to be a self-describing file format. Because every time we wanted to add an event or a column to trace, we were breaking the file format, which was bad design to begin with. So what we did is we said, okay, we have to bite the bullet. We're going to change it. We're going to change the file format into a self-describing format. Another benefit which we got out of that is that we reduced the footprint, because we removed a lot of redundant information that is currently stored. And we don't have to break the file format again when we're adding stuff to it. The stored procedures that you know, or the extended stored procedures that you use in 7.0 are being replaced. And the reason we replaced this is that they were implemented as extended stored procedures. And extended stored procedures don't integrate that well with the user mode scheduler. We cannot prevent blocking issues there. So we removed them and made them into server-side stored procedures, also known as spec procs. So this allows us to have this much tighter integration. So now you will say, oh, well, you changed from XPs to SPs. Okay, well, we have something in Profiler which allows you to save it in the old format and the new format, spit it out as a script. I will show you that in the later presentation today. One of the feedback that we got is like, people want to run a trace for a certain time. They want to start it at time X, and then they want to run it for X minutes or an hour. We couldn't do that unless you set up two jobs, one to start it and one to stop it. So what we added is the ability to create a time-based and size-based trace, or a combination of these two. So what you can say now is start this trace for 15 minutes, and the max file size is 150 megabytes. And whatever hits first will stop the trace. We also implemented file rollover. If you're tracing the server, especially I see this with inexperienced DBAs who are using Profiler and basically say, I don't know what I'm looking for, but I pick everything. So they pick every event and every data column and put it in the trace and start running the trace. So then we accumulate a lot of data. Your file size, max file size will be achieved very soon. And now what we can do is actually create a new file while we're going. This allows you to archive off the old one. This is also a requirement for auditing, because the way we implemented auditing into the server is using SQL trace. So while you're auditing the server, you're basically gathering all this information. One file is full. He creates a new file, starts saving it into that file, and you can archive off the old one and put it in a safe place in case your boss comes back to you and says, what was Pete doing at 5 o'clock on Wednesday? And then you can open up the trace file using Profiler and go look up what Pete was doing. So the other thing is that we added a couple of events. So as I said, we added the auditing events, which basically means all security related stuff. When you log in, who's touching which object, when is DDL submitted, who is changing an object, was it successful, was it a failure. That sort of information is all recorded through the auditing events. We also tell you when the data or the log file changes. So this was a request that a lot of people had, where they actually asked us, like, can we get an event when the file changes? Because if it changes too often, my increments are wrong. So if you set, for example, incremented by 1 megabyte, and you have a data file extension every 30 seconds, you waste a lot of CPU cycles extending this file. Extending a data file or a log file is an expensive thing. So yes, you want to use it, because it will save your butt, because you're not running out of log space. But you should also not misuse it. So that's why you need events to actually see when it happens. So we added it. The other thing is people wanted to see the show plan events. So that's way you can give me a trace, send me the trace, say here's the database, here's the trace. And I know exactly what the SQL was you're sending from your application. I don't need to have your application, but most of all, and more important, I can see the actual execution plan. So now I can look at the execution plan and see, wow, is this the right query plan or the wrong query plan based on the data that you sent me in the database? So that's a very important change. So the whole auditing thing is like Richard Maywire will talk about it more. It's like it's driven by C2 security. So we're implementing it using SQL trace. We're rolling over the file if we meet a certain size. If we're running out of disk space, C2 requires that you shut down the server because you need to record everything. C2 says from the moment the server starts till it stops, you need to have a complete log of things that happen. So what do you do when you're running out of space if you cannot keep on tracing? Well, you shut down the server. The way to read audit trails is through Profiler. And that's when I come into the client side of the world. So this release, there will be no separate UI explicitly for auditing. We'll do something for the next release. The way to switch on C2 auditing is to an SP configure option. And the reason it's an SP configure option is because we need to know it when we start the server that we need to start creating this audit trail. We also realized that for a lot of people, this level of granularity is a little bit too much. It's like too much information, we're tracing everything, we're tracing the whole world. So if you want to have a finer granularity, what you do is you go into Profiler, select the audit trace, select the database or the tables that you want to trace, and then create a stored procedure out of that which will auto-start, which will serve the same needs. So from the server, we're now back on the client. SQL Profiler is nothing more than a consumer of the events produced by SQL Trace. So one thing we changed, instead of using registered server, we moved it to a connection-based model like Query Analyzer. We're having them use the same shell now. Another thing is, what we did is, remember when I said at the beginning, people had problems correlating events and columns. They don't know what to look at, so we did a couple of things. First of all, we replaced the create trace wizard and the trace definitions that were saved in the registry, because people were confused about that. Trace definitions lived in the registry, they lived in files, they could create a trace through a wizard. What we did is we created templates. And these templates are the same as in Word or in Excel or in Query Analyzer now, where you basically have scenario-based templates for scenario-based traces that you want to do. You want to do a deadlock trace? Fine, we'll give you a deadlock trace. You only have to say which database you want to trace. You want a replay trace? Fine, tell me which database or databases you want to catch. You want a tuning database? You want a step through stored procedure logic? These are templates that exist today. The reason we moved to this model is it's an extensible model. Third parties can add to it. We can add more trace templates in the resource kit. If your favorite SQL teacher has his own version, he can ship that. It's like there are a lot of ways you can do this. So the other thing is that we now support the notion of a real server-side trace. So now you can start a trace which spits out his file on the server. And you only see a UI flow on the client, but you don't bring over and you don't save the file on the client. Table and file writers are trace destinations. We'll talk about that later today. And we made a huge improvement in the scalability. So the latest number is that the developer gave me is that he now can work on 4 GB trace files, which is basically the virtual memory limit that we have today. The way he does indexes, I think on the index file he had 256K of index information available. So he did a tremendous job on this part. So feeding into this, from Profiler, we're feeding into the index tuning wizard. Because what index tuning wizard does, it's nothing more than it's like it gives you the ability to tune your indexes. What it does, it takes a workload, and this workload can be a profiler trace, a profiler table, or a SQL script file. So then we take this workload and we start executing this against the server. We're not doing real execution, but we're asking the query optimizer, what is the I/O cost of this thing? How many I/O do you need to do? How many reads, how many writes, how many CPU do you think it costs? And we're going to iterate through this. What we added for this in 2000 is the support for indexed views and indexes on computed columns. So now we can look at your workload and not only recommend indexes like we did in 7.0, but we also can recommend indexed views and indexes on computed columns. Another thing which was limiting in 7.0 was the ability, if you were using the index tuning wizard, you better had a representative data set. If your data set was not representative in size, there could be mistakes in the recommendations we made. So what we allow you to do now is use a scaling factor. So this gives you the ability to say, this table has 10 rows, but in reality there are 100 million. Well, you have to be careful with this, because if your distribution of your keys is not identical, you will shoot yourself in the foot big time. And we gave you a great tool to do so. But on the other hand, it also gives you an ability, if you know what you're doing, to have a great tool and really use this in the most optimal way on a limited data set. But one key thing is, your data set has to be representative. In 7.0 we had something called index analysis, and we had index tuning wizard, and nobody ever understood or could explain to me why that was. It was basically a stripped down version of index tuning wizard. So what we did in Query Analyzer, we replaced it. We took it out and implemented the full-fledged index tuning wizard. So it allows you now to work on a script file that you're currently working on in your editor, so you don't have to switch context, or on a highlighted section in your editor. We also added some information about the indexes that we're going to delete on the recommendation page. We only told you about the new ones in 7.0. So you pick up index tuning wizard. It's like, we'll talk about that. If you're interested in this, come to my later session at 4:30. We'll talk about this in detail. So, Query Analyzer. This is probably the tool where we made the most changes for this release. All the other things are incremental features, small changes. GTS has a lot of work in it, in the details. This is a really visible change. What we did is we looked at our usability studies and how people were using this tool. And we found out that if they have a query which returns multiple result sets, having these multiple tabs in a grid wasn't really helpful, because they had one line, then next tab, 5 lines. If you did a SB help, for example, they wanted to see it in one screen. Using it in text mode didn't help, because we created sysnames of 128 characters, so the rest falls off the screen. So we created something, I called it the multi-result set grid. I will show you that in a moment. The other thing that we did is we changed the editor. And we added some functionality to basically do block indents. We added bookmarks. But most important, and this is the feature I use day in, day out, is take a block, comment it out, and remove the commands. So if we go to that, so to give you an idea what we are coming from, this is how it looked in 6.5. SB help from sysobjects. In 6.5 it was good to read because sysnames were 30 characters. It all fitted nice on the screen. That's why you could use OSQL or iSQL. In 7.0 we stretched the names to 128 characters. Not that you're using it, but we're printing the space. So everybody loved the grid, but the grid created multiple tabs. So what do? Instead is we created this view. where you basically have multiple grids in one place where you can have the information all condensed together. And then you can scroll through that. Now if you work through this and you're going to say, for example, you're working on this and you need to comment it out, what we did is we added a lot of stuff to say, okay, comment this out. So we take a whole block and edit it out, and then you can go from there. So the next thing that we added is actually, as I said, people are doing a lot of copy and pasting. It's like they go to Books Online, select something in Books Online, clipboard in, go to editor, paste the date. Or they are taking a stored procedure that somebody else wrote or that we wrote and use that as a framework. So they do a lot of scripting. So what we do is we created the object browser. So the object browser is left pane, right pane metaphor. Gives you the ability to, let me clean this one out. It gives you the ability to scroll through information. Say, for example, we're going to our well-known database pubs. We split it out, user tables from system tables, because a lot of people requested that. You can look at metadata, say columns. It gives you the information about the basic information. How many times in your life did you have to type a column list and made a typo because your server was case sensitive? Well, now you drag it in and out, and you don't have to do that anymore. The other thing is, how many times did you have to script it and were so, oh gee, now I have to go to Enterprise Manager, do a script of this table, I better do it somewhere else. So what we implemented is the ability to actually go to script and say, well, script this into a new window and create me this option. The other thing is, how many times did you have to go into a table and edit some information? I don't see a lot of people typing insert, update, and delete statements. Maybe delete all, that's how they get away, but inserts, I definitely don't see many people do that. So what we did is we added a full-fledged editor for all your table results into the query analyzer. So all to make your life a little bit easier and ability to work on that. So on the view side, the same thing. If you want to execute a stored procedure, we basically are going to parse for the parameters, give you a dialog, say this is what you want, and then script out the results as if you were doing it yourself. So you can use this two ways. You can figure out how to do it, you can play around with parameters, and you can also use it to script out things. The cool thing is, I don't have a 6.5 server on this, but this also works against 6.5, including the scripting, everything. So oops. So that's the object browser. If you don't like it on the left side, you can move it to the right side. It's not dockable. It's using the IE5 metaphor. We know that a tree view is not always the best metaphor. We have an SAP system. It has 15,000 tables. I don't know what's in there, but they have them. So you want to go after a table. 15,000 tables in a tree view is not the most luxurious position to be in. So what we did is we gave you object search. Object search is an ability to go after objects through a search, wildcard search on your database. If you know better what you're looking at, you can create more explicit objects. Otherwise, you do a much more wider search. The result of that you can treat the same as the object browser. You can drag it, you can script it, you can open up tables, etc. Then the last thing is like what we learned from the copy and pasting is that we introduced something called templates. So if you have beta 1, you don't have this right now. So, but for example, say, let's clean this out. You need to create a new database. So in order to create a new database, you say, well, I want to create a database with multiple file groups. Normally what I do is I go to Books Online and copy and paste the documentation. So now you choose the templates, gives you the template. Wow, okay. So what this does, it implements tokens. And these tokens, you can bring up a search replace dialog, which searches for all distinct tokens with the default values. You replace it once, and he replaces everything in your script file. So this is one way that you can make your life a lot easier. So you can create your own templates. It's like I have, for example, my own custom template in here. Custom templates for attaching all my databases. This is my basic environment. Since I install every day, my databases don't get attached. So if I want to do this, I basically say, what is the location? I specify a default value. I replace everything at once, and I have an executable script. So we thought this was pretty cool to help you out and get things going. So the other thing is, when we were looking at this, so we did this for immediately after beta 2, and then we started wondering, wow, this is actually pretty cool. But now you need to go to this insert dialog. So we added this templates thing here, and now you can say, for example, oh, I need a file header here. And after the file header, I'm going to create a view, which is a basic template. And then I need a stored procedure header because I'm going to create a stored procedure with an output parameter. So have you been writing script that fast? I don't think so. And you can still use your search and replace, get up with a distinct list, and go and get this going. It's completely extendable. You can write your own templates again. That's the reason why I have them move to this whole metaphor. So the last thing what we added in the object browser is the ability to, and this is also again a documentation issue, people need access to standard functions. So say, for example, that we want to do something and we want to have a mathematical function or a datetime function. Well, this datetime function is like, well, if you look up, so first of all, you can look up what the input parameters are. We display that. We say that it's like date diff has a couple of parameters, returns a value, date part, start date, end date. And then you can say, okay, for example, script this to execute, and we'll give you the same format as you will have here. You can replace the things, and you will be going. So for all places in SQL Server, standard functions, templates, you can use this whole metaphor. So now on to the performance profiling. So one of the things that we learned is like, Profiler is a great tool, but a lot of people don't know what to do with it. They just want to look at basic information. Basic information in terms of what are the statements executed, what is the duration, how much CPU did it take, how much reads, how much writes. That's the information they want. So what we did is we added that into Query Analyzer. The other thing what we did is we added client statistics, which basically gives you, and I'll talk about this in more detail in my later session, it gives you more information about what the hell is going on in my client. So in terms of, I'm waiting for the server, how many round trips did I have to do? How many packages did I have to send back and forth? All that stuff is in there. The next thing is what we did is like, a lot of people were asking us for, can we get some customization? I want to shell out some commands. I want to be able to do command line version control, for example. So what we did is we added custom commands to Query Analyzer. But we also added something else called shortcut queries. And the shortcut queries are basically, so you're working on this and you're typing this, and your colleague comes along and says, who is working on the system? And without doing anything, you're doing an SP who. And the only thing I did was Control 1. Or I want to see an SP monitor. And you're doing SP0. And what this is basically we allow you to customize the shortcuts saying Alt F1 is using SP help, Control F1 is SP help text. You can put in queries if you want. If you want to pass in a parameter, you highlight your text, it will be passed in as the first parameter. So if I say SP help text, for example, say for example we're in pubs, and in pubs we have by royalty, of course. Control F1 will give you the text without having to do anything. Your text in your window stays the same, you only highlight it and things happen. So that's what we did to start to help you work that out. We also have these customizable commands where you can hook up Profiler or check in, check out to source safe. This is command line integration. I don't want to fool you. But the editor is completely aware of the fact that its file is read-only. If the attribute changes, we'll make it editable for you and you can go from there. So the open table you already saw. One of the things we just finished is the version-dependent color coding. So the way we went in 7.0 is that we took the 7.0 keyword set and used that for color coding. That's fine for 7.0, but if you connect to 6.5 or 6.0, all of a sudden your top operator gets highlighted, you think it's a valid keyword, and we get confused users. So what are we doing now is that we have version-dependent syntax coloring. We basically look at the server, say this is 7.0, this is 2000, this is 6.5. And we take a keyword set based which comes with that. We also look if the server is case sensitive. If the server is case insensitive, we don't care about how you type in server names or table names or store procedures. If the server is sensitive, we actually do care, and if you typed it the wrong way, we don't highlight it. We are not that smart that we prompt you what it was. That's, I couldn't get that in, I'm sorry. The other thing is that we show you the index distribution in managed indexes. That's something we had in 6.5, 7.0 didn't have that. This is something that's recently being added. And the last thing that we did is like, I got beaten up when I took this job in May. They asked me to take over this team. I've got beaten up by a couple of managers, including Paul, saying, why can't you ship a debugger? Every time I go to a customer, they want a debugger. So my first response was, well, I can't do this, too much work. We have a debugger, it's in VC. So I went to talk to some customers and I got beaten up some more, and this really hurts. So what we did is we came up with a debugger, inquiry analyzer, integrated into the product. You launch it from, you go to a store procedure, you say store procedure, debug me. And you pass in the parameters. And we're in debug mode. So, well, this is cool. We show you the variables, and we'll go in there. Not done. So, of course, we can recurse into a store procedure. So you see that we're executing a store procedure here. SP help sysobjects, nothing interesting, but I'm stepping into sysobjects. I'm stepping more into it. Wrong store procedure, I'm gone, I'm stepping out, so I'm stepping back. So look here, we have a scalar function. So we have a user-defined function, and wouldn't it be cool to actually go and step into this function? Well, of course we can do that. So we go into the function, step into the function, and we scroll through this, and we get out of there. And, oh, well, here we have an update, and there's actually nothing in there, only the remark text says there is a trigger inserted, or a trigger attached to it. So you step into the update statement and you go into your trigger. So now you can do full round-trip debugging through all your T-SQL straight from Query Analyzer, and you will get your result set here. You have your call stack, your global variables, local variables, everything you need. So that's it for Query Analyzer. And last thing is some miscellaneous stuff. So as I said, my team is responsible for a lot of things. This release, we didn't do much on Agent. On Agent, we made it multi-instance aware. It's complete participating as an instance on the servers. And we did some bug fixing. We're using it internally for log shipping, so it did get some improvements from there. But that's basically all we did to it. SQL Mail is something my group recently inherited. And we looked at it and said, wow, we need to do something. We couldn't do any functional changes, although we made one change. You can now set the sender instead of just always using the profiler as the sender. But we basically first had to clean it up. We had to have it use ODBC instead of DB library. We moved it to extended mapping instead of single mapping because that's threading aware. And we support Unicode parameters along parameters. So that's what we did. We are working on a full SMTP implementation. I don't know if that will make the product, but then it will go to the web. But we heard you, I heard you. It's like we're working on it. But the question is, can we get this into the product? Web Assistant, we didn't make any changes. So what you see is that we basically, what we did is we went out, talked to customers. How did you use the product? And we basically spent, and my team spent a lot of time talking to customers, trailing news groups, learning and learning and learning and get beaten up. And so we're trying to improve things, and we're actually think we made a pretty substantial progress in a lot of tools. So if you want to learn more about where we're going, or if you have something to say, it's like we're all at the birds of the feather. It's like Ewan Garden and Bruce Prang, or all in my team, will be there. It's like, just come and see us, say hello. If you have questions, suggestions, whatever, just come and talk to us. Bruce is going to talk about server-side scripting. That's going to cover DMO and WMI scripting. I'm going to talk this afternoon. Bruce's talk is on 3, I think. I'm going to talk about SQL Server tools and how you can use that for performance tuning. And I will walk you through a concrete scenario of how you can use the tools and what can you get out of it. Ewan is going to talk about developing data transformations, the overview and enhancements, and a specific targeted session against advanced DTS and data warehousing. So if you want to find more information, it's like it's on the web. It's like we're all trolling these news groups. You will find me out there. You'll find Ewan out there answering questions. And if you have email or request for functionality, email to SQL Wish, or you can send it to me. So right now I want to open up the floor for questions if you have anything, or you can come and see me afterwards. Thanks very much and have a very good conference. If you have a question, please use the mic.
Jeez.
Hello.
When you talked about source-safe integration, you made a quick qualification of it. You said it's command line only. Could you elaborate on that?
The question is about source-safe integration. Basically what we're doing is, as I said, I don't want to fool you that this is full-fledged source code integration. What we do is we allow to have you detect that you're on a read-only file, then you can hit check out or check in through the command options. This will say to source safe in my environment saying, oh, I need to check out this file. That will change the file attribute. Yeah, the editor will respond to it. We don't have any way today. Actually, I wrote a utility which is out on the web, which allows you to script out a database and stick it into source safe file by file. We were looking at making that a product, but I couldn't get that to work and fit it into the schedule. So it's not full-fledged, it's just the first step. It's basically driven from the fact that you can do command line integration into Query Analyzer. So you have to put it in perspective. That's right.
Actually, it's just a comment. I noticed there were some slides that were not on the hard copy that you did have in your presentation.
Say that again, I didn't hear
You had a
it.
slide or two that was not on the hard copy that was given out. I was hoping that that would be covered in the CD. So
All the slides will be on the CD.
okay, thanks.
Templates and parameter search replace function which you are talking about in the query analyzer. Can that be done programmatically?
Can you turn off the echo because I don't hear anything? I'm sorry.
The template and parameter search replace function in the query analyzer, can that be done programmatically?
The question, if I understand the question, is like, can you use the search and replace in the templates? Can you use that programmatically? Today the answer is no. It's like that's built into Query Analyzer.
And what about runtime editing while debugging? Like, I mean, can I change the stored procedure or like, I mean, a particular statement when I'm debugging?
You can if I understand, I have a hard time hearing you, sorry.
Oops.
If I understand the question correctly, you want to do runtime editing. That means while somebody is executing a stored procedure?
No, while I'm debugging it.
Well, it's like what I showed you is like if you pick a stored procedure and you debug it. So you go to a stored procedure and you say, debug this guy. He will ask you for parameters if there are any, and then you go step through it. You can set breakpoints. You can set breakpoints on stored procedures that somebody else is that he's calling into. But that's all we do. Otherwise, we can take this offline. I don't understand the question then. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Sir.
Yes. Is there a way to just capture a sliding window of data, such as, say, a 10 megabyte file of data that keeps moving along, sort of like Network Monitor does or something? Or, you see what I'm saying? Because you might be looking for an event that only occurs, say, once every 45 minutes that you want to capture what's going on right at that time. And so you don't want to have this huge file, but you'd like to have this window of data that you can stop after the event occurs.
You mean from a profiler perspective?
Just from the data capture, so that you can actually, you don't necessarily have to be capturing a huge file. Kind of rolling over the file data. Like Network Monitor, when you're doing a trace of TCP IP, it keeps rolling over and keeps moving along.
I don't understand the question. Let's take it offline.
Okay, and Profiler still sometimes kills a server even after Service Pack 1 and 7.0. Are those known problems, or have they been addressed?
It shouldn't be happening, and if that's a problem, we need to work with you.
Okay.
In error handling in stored procedures, to have something like on arrow go to.
The question is about error handling in T-SQL, to have an on-arrow go-to. This is really not my area. I know it's a request that's out there. So it is communicated to the T-SQL guys, but it's like not in this release. They didn't change the error handling for this release. I'm sorry. But we do know it as a feature request.
Is it possible to get summation information from the profiler itself, such as the number of times a database has been opened in the last 5 minutes instead of having to read the trace logs?
What kind of information I didn't hear the first.
Summation information, such as summing up the number of times table's been accessed within 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, have that spit out by the profiler?
You mean aggregation over results?
Correct. Have the profiler do that instead of us having to read the...
Right now, the way it's like Profiler is optimized for tracing the information and getting it out. The way we do it internally is trace it into a table, and we either pivot around the table using Excel pivot sheet or OLAP cube to get that information out.
The backup tool of SQL 2000, does it support autoloaders? Autoloaders. Does it automatically extend the backup to the second, third tapes?
It's right now. I don't know the real answer to that because it's the only thing I know is that the autoloaders in that perspective are that much different between each other that we couldn't get standard API support for that. It's like the one big change that we made is we moved to this MSFT format in 7.0. But there is no standard API to deal with autoloaders. So from my perspective, I don't have a way to abstract it without creating a separate package per autoloader. And that's undoable for my team. Sir?
Yeah, when you demoed the debugger, you picked a permanent stored procedure. Is there a way to also do that with a temporary stored procedure that an application would generate?
The question is, can you debug a temporary stored procedure created by an application? If it's a real temporary stored procedure, like in one pound define, it's no. If it's a 2 pound define, yes, you can work around it. You could, internally I can tweak it because the way I get to an object is by the object ID. But then I need to, the problem is I need to live in the scope of your application. I cannot get through it outside. Because that temporary table, or the same is true for temporary table, but the temporary stored procedure is only visible to your connection scope, which I'm not able to get into from my debugger. if I'm not the guy who creates it. If your debugger is the guy who creates the temporary stored procedure, yes, you can debug the temporary stored procedure, of course. But that's right now what it is. Because there is no way in my namespace how I can get to the object.
Yes, sir. While copying database, is the source database unavailable to the user while it's being copied over to a destination?
That's a good observation. While we're copying the database in the copy database wizard, while we're copying the file, we temporarily detach the database on the source because we need read access on the file, and SQL Server exclusively opens up the file. So while we're copying the file, that user database will be offline. We'll copy the file because we need to have a guaranteed image of that file because we don't want it changing underneath us. And then when we're done copying, we immediately attach it back.
Okay, so it will be offline.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
When you were talking about the template feature, I'm interested in being able to share templates. Where do they live? On the client, on the server?
The question is templates and sharing of templates, and where do they live? Templates live in a location that you specify in the options dialog. Today, that is in program files, MS SQL Server tools. You can change that to a UNC name. That's fine. We also allow you in SQL Query Analyzer to save your configuration file with all these settings, your shortcut queries and your command files, to a single file. Copy this file around and load it on every workstation. So you don't have to go and type it in everywhere. It's like you can simply do a save load configuration.
The server file I/O for SQL Trace, does that work with SQL 7 or just with 2000?
Sorry, say that again, sorry.
The server file I/O, so keeping all the I/O for SQL Trace on the server, does that work with 7.0?
No, that's a change in the tracer on the server. So that's 2000 only.
2000 only.
Yeah.
Also, any log view tools being written to decrypt the log, regenerate SQL code, redo code?
That's not my department, but it's not being exposed right now. I know we're talking about it exposing either an API or something. There are people as the persons to talk to is Greg Smith or Merrick, and I forgot his last name. But there are two program managers from the storage engine here who will be able to talk to you about this. Last one.
Hi, I have a general question. Right now, if I do select add version for the official release of SQL Server 2000, what will I get?
I don't know. I have to try that.
For the beta, I think I get 7.5. For beta 1, not sure for the official release.
For beta 1, you will get 7.5. 2080 in the build number.
So
the internal build numbering is being changed to 80.
I see. So
but the way to get that information is actually to server properties. That will give you the version number, then you don't have to parse this string.
But I have application that depend heavily on this, so I need to know what the official number would be.
This is how it looks today, but I can't guarantee you that it will not change before RTM, I'm sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Have a good day.